Welcome to Deep Cuts and Deep Thinking. Today's deep dive is taking a massive stack of sources. We have musicology papers, historical band analyses, and these incredibly dense fan mythology breakdowns.
Some of those stand theories are pretty out there.
Oh, we will definitely get to those. But we're using all of this to unpack the enigma that is the American rock band Tool.
A massive undertaking.
Truly. We are going to explore exactly how four guys from Los Angeles blended complex mathematics, sacred geometry, and surprisingly, practical special effects to create this uncompromising musical empire.
And for you listening right now, I really want to emphasize something.
Go for it.
Whether you are a diehard metalhead or you are just someone insanely curious about how artists manage to bend the rules of commercial media to their absolute breaking point, well, this exploration is going to be a masterclass in creative sovereignty.
I love that phrase, creative sovereignty, because, you don't just wake up one morning and decide to write a mathematically perfect metal song.
No, definitely not.
You need a very specific set of architects for that. So let's look at the incredibly unlikely convergence of these band members in Los Angeles around 1990.
Right, the convergence is what makes you realize Tool wasn't a standard rock band at all.
Not even close.
They were this collision of completely distinct crafts. Take Maynard James Keenan on vocals. He wasn't your typical Sunset Strip frontman trying to get famous. He was actually a former United States Army surveyor.
Which is just such a strange background for a rock singer.
It is. And he had studied visual arts in Michigan. Plus, before the band really took off, he was working in Los Angeles remodeling pet stores.
I just love that visual. Remodeling pet stores. But, think about what an army surveyor actually does.
Oh, that's a good point.
Their entire job is about spatial awareness, right? Mapping out terrain, understanding structural foundations.
Yeah, exactly.
You can completely see the architectural mindset applied to how he constructs his vocal melodies later on.
Absolutely. It's very deliberate. And then you have Danny Carey on drums. Carey was a classically trained percussionist from Kansas, heavily influenced by jazz fusion and progressive rock.
So not just a heavy hitter.
No, very technical. He was working as an in-demand studio musician, playing everything from jazz gigs to pop sessions. And finally, you have Adam Jones on guitar. Now, Jones had moved from Illinois to Los Angeles, specifically to work in the Hollywood film industry.
This is the part that always fascinates me.
Right. He was doing practical special effects, makeup, and sculpting for massive cinematic productions. We're talking Jurassic Park and Terminator 2.
Wait, I want to pause on that because I think this is like the Rosetta Stone for understanding the band.
It really is.
When you look at those backgrounds, Tool is essentially an audiovisual effects house masquerading as a rock band.
That is the perfect way to describe them.
It completely explains their aesthetic. Instead of standing in front of a camera lip-syncing like everyone else on MTV at the time, Adam Jones was personally directing their early music videos.
Using stop-motion animation, no less.
Exactly. He was heavily inspired by surrealist artists like the Brothers Quay. They were literally building these tactile, organic, terrifying little worlds out of clay and metal.
And that behind-the-scenes illusionist background perfectly set the stage for how they interacted with the press, too.
Oh yeah, they were notorious for that.
They cultivated this deliberately deceptive internal mythology. If we look at the historical sources, there is a highly specific detail about how they handled their early promotional interviews.
The fake philosophy.
Yes. To mock gullible media, the band invented a completely fake philosophy called lacrimology.
The study of crying.
Precisely. They claimed this philosophy was founded in 1949 by a fictional author named Ronald P. Vincent.
So good.
And they sat down with major journalists and deadpanned that their music was designed to induce emotional crying as a catalyst for personal evolution.
And the press bought it.
The music press just swallowed it whole. Major magazines actually reported on lacrimology as a legitimate, profound, philosophical underpinning of the band.
See, I have a major problem with this, though.
Oh.
Yeah, if they were willing to orchestrate an elaborate hoax just to test the media, how can fans trust anything they say about the deeper meaning of their music?
That is a fair question.
Right. If they are lying right out of the gate about their foundational philosophy, isn't the whole thing just a pretentious joke?
It is a very valid critique. However, the sources clarified that the hoax actually functioned as a necessary filter.
A filter? How so?
Well, it was a mechanism designed to discard surface-level consumers. By putting out a fake philosophy, they were demanding that true listeners dig into the actual art.
Okay, I see.
They wanted you to engage with the complex music itself, rather than passively accepting whatever neatly packaged promotional narrative the record label or the media handed you.
So it was a test.
Exactly. It was a test to see who was actually listening.
So shedding the fake PR narratives is what allowed them to push into genuine esoteric concepts.
Yes, exactly.
And if we move from the early 90s to their 2001 album, Lateralus, the esotericism is very real there.
Oh, incredibly real.
We mentioned the mathematical perfection at the very start of this deep dive, but it goes so much deeper than just counting syllables.
It really does. Because the Fibonacci sequence in the title track isn't just a clever party trick.
Right.
Keenan and Jones incorporated that specific numerical sequence as a direct homage to sacred geometry and the golden ratio, which is approximately 1.618.
Wow.
They were attempting to translate visual geometric perfection into an auditory format.
And it wasn't just the vocal patterns either. The original working title for the song was 987.
Which is such a subtle nod.
It is, because that directly reflects the shifting time signatures of the main instrumental riff.
Right, the time changes.
The band cycles through 9/8, 8th, 8th, and 7/8 time. And I remember seeing in the notes that 987 happens to be the 16th integer in the Fibonacci sequence.
It's just layers upon layers.
But wait, for someone who isn't a music theory major, what does playing in a 9/8 time signature actually feel like to the listener?
Well, to put it in perspective, most popular music is in 4/4 time.
Right, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Exactly. It is steady, predictable, and your brain naturally knows exactly when to nod your head. But a 9/8 time signature contains 9/8 notes per measure.
Which is an odd number.
Right, and because it is an odd number, it constantly feels off-kilter and unresolved.
Like it's stumbling.
Yeah, sort of. Just when your brain expects the riff to comfortably restart, it jerks you forward into the next measure early or holds you in suspense a fraction of a second too long.
That sounds disorienting.
It can be. It creates this perpetual sensation of being pulled forward.
And that perpetual pulling motion ties directly into the primary metaphor of the song.
The spiral.
Yes, the core visual for Lateralus is the expanding spiral. From the sources, the spiral represents evolving human consciousness.
Which is a huge theme for them.
It is not just a static circle where you repeat the same mistakes over and over. The idea is that human growth is a continuous cycling through familiar emotional and psychological pain.
You're moving outward.
Exactly. With each iteration, because you have learned something, you are experiencing that pain at a higher, broader level of awareness. You are spiraling outward.
And the lyrics culminate in a literal command to spiral out, keep going.
It's so powerful.
It is. But, when you hand your audience a puzzle with this level of mathematical and philosophical density, there are psychological consequences.
Oh boy, yeah.
The fan base is going to lose their minds trying to solve it.
Enter the holy GIF.
Yes, here we go.
This is one of the wildest fan theories I have ever read. So around 2001, fans on the early internet became so obsessed with the math on this album that they fully believed the standard track listing you bought in the store was a decoy.
A decoy album. Just think about that.
I know. They theorized that if you reordered the 13 tracks into a complex double spiral arrangement where pairs of tracks summed up to the number 13, you would unlock the true masterwork.
And people spent hours on this.
Days. People swore it made the album flow perfectly.
It is a beautiful testament to how deeply the music resonated, honestly. But here is the fascinating psychological takeaway from the historical audits.
What's that?
The band members and their producer, David Bottrell, have entirely debunked this.
Completely shut it down.
Yep. The official track sequence wasn't a decoy at all. It was painstakingly crafted for seamless sonic transitions.
Right.
The unbroken crossfades and ambient trilogies on the album are completely ruined if you do the holy gift math.
So the fans essentially out-tooled Tool.
Basically, yeah.
The band had conditioned their listeners so intensely to look for hidden mathematical Easter eggs that the fans literally started hallucinating patterns that were never even there.
Precisely. They elevated a structural motif into an obsessive, unconfirmed gospel. It just shows how powerful the band's mystique had become.
Okay, so understanding the math, the time signatures, and the theory on paper is one thing, but sheet music doesn't make a sound on its own.
Right, you have to play it.
Exactly. How do four human beings physically execute these structures, live on a stage, without sounding like a sterile, rigid computer program?
Well, to understand the execution, we have to look at the mechanical engine of the rhythm section. Let's start with Danny Carey's setup.
Okay.
Because of his background in both jazz and geometry, he doesn't just play a standard acoustic drum kit.
That would be too easy.
Way too easy. He surrounds his kit with geometric synth triggers called Mandala V3 pads. These pads have 128 position rings and generate up to 16,256 unique trigger points per pad.
Wait, I just need to stop you right there.
Yeah.
What does that actually mean for the listener? Why on earth does a single drum pad need 16,000 different trigger points?
Okay, think about a traditional electronic drum pad. You hit it, and it plays a single sampled sound at varying volumes.
Like a basic drum machine.
Right, and it sounds robotic.
Yeah.
But the Mandala pads recognize exactly where your stick lands, from the dead center all the way out to the edge, and exactly how hard you strike. So hitting it a millimeter to the left might trigger a slightly different microsample of an Indian tabla, or a subtly different synthesizer swell.
That is insane detail.
It is. It gives electronic, synthesized sounds the dynamic, breathing realism and imperfection of an acoustic instrument.
That makes total sense now. And he uses these pads while tracking insanely complex polymeters. The sources talk about him playing in 5/8 time over a 6/8 frame.
Yes.
Just so we are crystal clear, what does a polymeter actually sound like to someone standing in the room?
Imagine Danny playing a repeating pattern that is 5 beats long with his right hand, while his left foot plays a repeating pattern that is 6 beats long.
Okay, I'm trying to picture it.
Because they are different lengths, they immediately fall out of phase with each other.
Right.
It creates a dizzying, tumbling, rolling effect where the rhythm feels like it is constantly turning over on itself.
Like you're losing your balance.
Exactly. But eventually, mathematically, those two patterns will perfectly align and click back together on the first beat.
That has to be so satisfying.
It really is. And the truly mind-bending part is that he often records these tracks in the studio without using a click track.
Wait, really? No metronome?
No click track.
Ooh.
The tempo variations are entirely human.
That is just ridiculous. It gives this freezing cold mathematics a completely organic, sweating, breathing groove.
Yes, precisely.
And he is locking in with Justin Chancellor on the bass guitar. Now, Chancellor joined the band just before their 1996 album, Anima, and he fundamentally changed their sonic architecture.
He absolutely did. Chancellor brought an incredibly resonant, punchy mid-range tone to the band, and the secret to his sound is that he uses a clean and dirty split signal.
Okay, another technical term. Break down how a split signal actually works. What is clean versus dirty?
So instead of plugging his instrument into just one amplifier, Chancellor splits the audio signal and sends it to two different amplifiers simultaneously.
Oh, I see.
The first amplifier is kept completely clean. It provides the pure, deep, unadulterated low frequencies. It keeps the foundation heavy and clear so it doesn't turn to mud.
Like the solid floor of the song.
Right. Then the second amplifier is dirty, meaning it is heavily distorted, adding aggressive, biting high-end grit.
So he's getting both extremes at once.
Exactly. By blending them, his bass guitar functions as a lead melodic voice, cutting through the mix with distortion, while still acting as the rhythmic anchor holding down the low end.
He is literally driving the melody forward with the bass line.
Yeah, he takes up so much space.
Which leaves a massive, wide-open sonic space for Adam Jones to fill.
And Jones fills it with a massive harmonic foundation. His lead guitar approach is meticulously crafted.
Tell me about his setup.
He primarily uses drop D tuning on vintage Gibson Les Paul silver bursts. On some tracks, he'll even throw in a capo to shift the pitch of the open strings.
Right, a capo can completely change the voicing.
Exactly. But the real secret to his massive tone is his amplification. He blends 3 distinct amplifiers simultaneously.
3 at once?
Yes. He runs a modern high-gain diesel VH4, a vintage Marshall Super Bass, and a third rotating amplifier all at the exact same time.
Why do you need 3 amplifiers at once? Explain the mechanism of layering those frequencies.
Well, it is all about sonic real estate. No single amplifier can perfectly cover the entire frequency spectrum.
It makes sense.
The Deagle provides the heavy modern crunch and the extreme low-end chunk. The vintage Marshall fills in the mid-range with a classic rock bite. And the rotating amplifier adds a swirling spatial texture to the high frequencies.
So he's building a wall.
A huge wall.
Yeah.
When you blend all 3 together, it sounds less like a single instrument and more like a massive wall of sound like 3 guitars playing in perfect unison.
To me, Tool operates completely backward from a standard rock group.
How so?
Well, in a normal band, the singer is the undisputed focal point, the guitar plays the catchy melody, and the bass and drums sit in the back to just keep time.
Standard rock formula.
Right. But in Tool, it is totally inverted. The bass guitar actually carries the main melody. The drums act as the lead instrument, wildly exploring the musical space. The vocals operate as an atmospheric rhythm instrument, weaving in and out of math like a chant. And the lead guitar acts as the thick, heavy mortar holding the entire weird structure together.
I love that analogy, and if you listen closely to their records, it holds up perfectly.
Yeah.
Yeah, if Adam Jones is the mortar, think about what happens to a brick building when the mortar disappears.
It falls apart.
Right, and there are specific moments in their songs where the lead guitar suddenly drops out. And instead of the song feeling empty, it suddenly feels incredibly naked and vulnerable.
Oh, wow.
The interlocking complexity of the bass and drums is totally exposed. That is intentional architectural design.
You would think this uncompromising, hyper-focused approach to making music would make them invincible.
You would think that.
But it actually slammed them head-on into the rigid corporate machinery of the modern music industry.
Yes, the infamous 13-year sabbatical.
Oh, man.
If you're a fan, you acutely remember the massive, agonizing gap between their album 10,000 Days released in 2006 and Fear Inoculum, which didn't come out until 2019.
For over a decade, fans assumed the worst. I mean, the rumor mill suggested the band members hated each other, or they were suffering from the worst case of writer's block in rock history.
The public speculation was rampant, but the reality documented in the legal records tells a far more mundane and exhausting story.
Lawsuits, right?
Yes. The delay was primarily due to an 8-year legal siege. It began over a copyright dispute regarding artwork provided by a friend of the band, but it spiraled completely out of control.
How bad did it get?
Well, Tool ended up having to countersue their own insurance company, Clarendon National Insurance, over a liability dispute regarding those very same copyright claims.
Just imagine the sheer absurdity of that situation. You are trying to write a transcendent, mathematically perfect song about the sacred geometry of human evolution, and then you have to go sit in a sterile conference room until 6 p.m. for a legal deposition about insurance liability.
It is jarring. Adam Jones explicitly described it as the worst thing that ever happened to them.
I believe it.
The litigation completely drained their creative focus. Every time they built momentum in the writing room, the legal proceedings disrupted them. It was a massive financial and emotional drain.
Did they win?
They finally won the case, on all counts, but the victory didn't come until 2015.
And during the same massive 13-year gap, the music industry underwent a fundamental shift.
Everything changed.
Everything. People stopped buying physical media and streaming took over, but Tool was engaging in a massive standoff.
A very stubborn one.
Yeah, they flat out refused to put their music on digital platforms like Spotify or Apple Music. They didn't want the music chopped up into individual tracks, thrown into random playlists, or shuffled by algorithms.
Which is fair to their artistic vision.
Right. They wanted to preserve the integrity of the long-form album experience.
But from a business perspective, it was an incredibly risky move. Experts thought Tool was committing commercial suicide by refusing to adapt to the digital age.
But then came the triumphant return. On August 2nd, 2019, they finally relented and released their entire back catalog digitally.
And the response was wild.
The outcome was staggering. Within 48 hours of uploading their music, they occupied all top 5 spots on the Billboard Hard Rock Digital Song Sales chart.
Unbelievable.
They absolutely dominated, and shortly after, their brand new album, Fear Inoculum, debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200, notably displacing Taylor Swift's album, Lover.
It really proved that their audience hadn't moved on. They were just patiently waiting.
And the critical validation followed right behind the commercial success, didn't it?
It did. The track 7 Empest won the Grammy for Best Metal Performance. This is a track that is 15 minutes and 44 seconds long.
That is so long for a mainstream award.
It set a Recording Academy record for the longest composition to ever win that award.
15 minutes and 44 seconds of uncompromising metal taking home a Grammy. It really ties this whole journey together for you as a listener.
How so?
Well, we live in an era where algorithms feed you 15-second clips. Everything is designed to be fast, frictionless, easy, and entirely disposable.
Yeah, definitely.
Tool does the exact opposite. They demand that you sit down, pay attention, and do the hard work. Their band name is quite literal.
Right, a tool.
They are a wrench. They are a tool, a catalyst, meant to be used for your own introspective utility. You have to actively apply the wrench to your own mind to get anything out of it.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. And that leaves us with a final thought to consider, which builds on everything we've explored from these sources.
Lay it on us.
If the friction of struggling to understand a dense, complex piece of art is precisely what makes it meaningful and transformative, what are we losing by demanding that all our information and entertainment be frictionless and instantly digestible? If you like this episode, please support the show by liking and subscribing.